So, is everybody that we think is going to join on, do we need to give it another minute?
Yeah, 1 second, Todd. There's a couple people that haven't moved over to panelists yet. Janice, are you keeping up with them?
I'm trying, but for some reason, if you could try it, because I'm not getting that option now. It's giving me the option to make them the host, but not the normal prompt to make them a panelist.
Yeah, I don't have that ability.
Okay. Well, let me go back.
We're trying, Chessa.
Okay, Chet, the only thing that I know to do, because I know you were able to move people over before. If you could, do you have an option to reclaim the host? Let me see if I can make you the host and maybe you could move them because I can't get that option at all.
Sounds good.
Okay, just did that. You should get it. Sorry,
Okay.
everyone.
All right, here we are.
I've been promoted. Woo!
You're on probation, Chessa, so
And Barb and my trusty leader has been promoted as well. Yay.
All right, Janice, are we ready to go?
Yes, we are.
all right. So 11 minutes late, but better late than never. This is the February 14th meeting of the Cbta Tac. First, we'd like to do a roll call certification of a quorum. Janice?
Sure. Let's start with Town of Ashland, Miss Amos. I thought I saw her that she was in. I know she's
She's
with
here.
us. We'll
She
go
is.
back.
Here, I'm sorry.
That's
Can
all
you
right.
hear me?
Thank you. Yes,
Yeah?
I can. Charles City County, Miss Russell. Chesterfield County, Miss Smith.
Here.
Miss Walker.
Here.
Goochland County, Mr. Coleman.
Here.
Mr. Goyne. I will resend him the link, and I had sent that to him, but he may not. I don't know that he was on my original email, so I'll go back and make sure he has a link. Hanover County, Mr. Vadunez.
Here.
Mr. Flagg.
Here.
Henrico County, Chair Yor.
Here.
Miss Meidler.
Here.
New Kent County, Mr. Stauder. Miss Leduc. Powhatan County, Mr. Chardine.
Here.
Thank you. City of Richmond, Miss Clark.
Here.
Mr. Bridewell. DRPT, Mr. Brule.
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Dubinsky.
Here.
Mr. Mann.
Here.
Mr. Riblett.
I know he's listening online, couldn't get connected.
Virginia Port Authority, Miss Nelson.
Here.
Thank you. GRTC, Miss Torres.
Here.
Miss Sink.
Here.
RMTA, Miss Dean. And Plan RVA, Mr. Parsons.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes the roll call, and we do have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Janice. Next item, opening statement regarding virtual participation. That's posted in the meeting link. Is that correct, Chet?
That's correct. As far as this committee is concerned, we're operating under this virtual fashion until further notice. And that will certainly be a discussion point when it gets to that status with the full authority.
Great, thank you. Next item, consideration of amendments to the agenda. Any additions or changes to the agenda? We lost Chet. Chet,
Mr.
question?
Chair, I'm not aware of any amendments to the agenda.
Okay, great, thank you. Next item, approval of the January 10th, 2022 Cvta Tac meeting minutes. Everybody has had a chance to review. There's no changes. We'll entertain a motion.
Chair, this is Dirana. So moved.
Thank you, Dorana. Do we have a second?
Barb, second.
Thank you, Barb. We have a motion, a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, item carries. Next item, public comment. Do we have anybody registered to provide public comment?
We do not. We didn't have anybody in advance, and there's no one that's attending right now that has requested the ability to address the committee.
Okay, thank you. Next item, Cvta Tech Chairman's report. One thing I have to report is we have a very tight schedule moving forward for the regional project prioritization, selection, and determining budget, which is coming through the Finance Working Group to the Finance Committee. There was a Finance Committee meeting last Wednesday on the 9th. So that was a topic of discussion there. I don't know if everybody had a chance to watch that meeting, but basically, as we sit here today, we don't have a funding level or allocation level for regional prioritization. So that's one of the things we'll need to talk about today as we move forward. Other than that, that's all I have to report at the moment. Next item is Cbta Tac staff update. Chet.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple items on the Finance Committee, as you mentioned. They did take action to recommend approval of the revenue projections for FY23 to 26. But as you said, there was no recommendation in terms of debt policy or anything further than the use of those revised projections for establishing our baseline revenue estimates for 23 to 26. A couple items that are upcoming for the full authority on the 25th. The Finance Committee did take action to present options for financial advisors to the full authority. The Finance Committee, I think, did not want to direct that conversation and thought it was more prudent to have an overall discussion with all authority members present. So that's something that has kind of been in the works for a couple months, and the Finance Committee is moving that forward on the docket for consideration on the 25th. And that may, if there is action, that may hopefully speed things up in terms of identifying how the CBTA moves forward in assumption of debt and financing projects and leveraging and all the things that impact our project evaluation and selection, and whether that happens now or later. The other thing that I think we can probably discuss under the next item is impacts of decisions to our schedule moving forward and how that impacts smart scale applications. So everything is related these days.
Yes, indeed. All right, thank you. Any questions for Chad at this point? All right, seeing none, might as well go ahead and dive right in. Item 6, regional project prioritization. We have this broken into two parts. One is the update on the project applications, eligibility and screening, and the second item will be update to the bench contract for third-party estimates. Chet.
Yes, thank you very much. So everyone should have, I believe we sent this out to the full TAC, a table with green headers that shows eligible regional projects for cost validation. There were 31 projects contained in that table, and we had received a total of 37 applications. So doing the math, that means 6 applications were questioned according to the framework. And staff is following up with each of those, the jurisdictions that sponsored each of those 6 applications to see if there was any additional data or updated information that could be provided in regards to this project's eligibility. I think I talked to everyone today directly, and I think that we may be able to move 3 of those projects or 2 or 3 of those applications out of the 6 to the eligible project list. And the others are not, and we'll certainly work with those jurisdictions to help understand what those issues are. And obviously, as we consider the framework as a, God, I hate the term, but a living document, that's something we can make adjustments to in the future if that's something that the TAC wants to think about. But I think with that information in front of us and the applications that we see, there's a lot of choice there for regional funding to be considered, and there's a big range, a big fluctuation in type and costs and impacts and leverage amounts and lots of other things. So while staff is not ready at this point to look at the scoring, we are well underway and have we're working not through, we've already gone through the screening process, and we're now making sure that these projects are represented well in the model and that their characteristics are reflected in that way, so that we can run the model and get the scores and the impacts, and then provide those for evaluation. I think that we'll be okay on that. And the other item on the agenda is to talk about the third-party cost estimates. But I think once everything comes together, the timing will be right to have all that ready for review and evaluation at the right time.
Thank you. Questions so far?
So I got the impression that at this meeting, the benefit and cost as submitted in the application was going to be ready.
No, I'm sorry. We haven't been able to get the full model runs done to evaluate the benefit score. Once that's all plugged in, we'll certainly be able to turn that around quickly based on the costs that were submitted.
Right. So when is that going to happen?
I don't have staff on the call with me, but I would expect that we can get that done in the next few days. I know that there were just a few questions hanging out on a couple particular projects. So I think we can get that back out to you by email by midweek.
Okay. And just so everyone knows, that'll give us an idea based on the estimates that were submitted with the applications, but they still have to be vetted by the third party.
Yes.
Which will lead into the next agenda item. But before we move on to that, any other questions regarding work thus far? All right, so the third-party estimates, update us on that, Chet.
Yes. So in the essence of time and in consultation with the TAC, we are moving forward with utilizing the Chesterfield County bench consultant listing and to get third-party cost estimates done. That process is underway, and actually we solicited submittals from all of the eligible firms, and We are expecting those by the end of the day today for evaluation. Staff will be doing that evaluation based on what we get today and making that choice so that we can move forward with the process to get those evaluations done. We have, I'm trying to find it. We have a good list of possible firms, and we did limit that to those firms that were not doing existing work for any of the other jurisdictions, any of the jurisdictions in the Cbta region, so that we could avoid any potential conflict. And we'll be preparing a summary of those submittals and getting ready to, and we expect to give a notice to proceed by Wednesday. Once that notice to proceed is accepted and everything is ready to move forward, we are asking for evaluations to be complete by March 1st, which will then allow a few days for individual jurisdiction review once the evaluations are done. And then from March 7th to the 11th, if needed, there will be meetings with each jurisdiction to review those evaluations with an end date of March 17th to have a finalized third-party estimate for each of the eligible projects. So the thing that's going to play in here is for those 6 projects that we had in question, we need to get that shored up so that we can get a full list to the chosen firm by Wednesday, and that shouldn't be a problem.
Well, and if for some reason there is a delay with one of those projects, you can still give the consultant a whole batch of them to get going on.
Yeah, we're prepared to use the 31 we have, and yes.
Yeah.
And we'll provide all of the plan is to provide them all the information that was submitted as supplemental materials with the applications. Just basically pass everything that you all submitted onto the consultants so that they have all that at their fingertips. And then obviously there'll be some back and forth if they have questions when they review it all to that point.
Can you tell folks again the dates that they are going to have to do stuff?
Yes, we expect the evaluations to be complete by March 1st, meaning return to me. And then we'll get that out for everybody else to review once we receive those. We have on the calendar March 2nd to March 4th. So that week, that first week in March, the draft evaluations will be available for you. And then that's just to review it. And then if you want to have a more in-depth conversation with the consultant and staff, that's the following week, the 7th to the 11th of March will be set aside for individual meetings to understand and provide additional materials and revise those estimates as needed, with the goal of Thursday the 17th, having those finalized so that we can have, and that's the drop dead date, because that's when we need to have the agendas ready for the March authority meeting.
Okay, so the reviews are going to be sent out March 2nd. Did you give a window, or it's March 2nd?
I think it'll be the 1st or 2nd, depending on when I get them from the consultant. And then you'll have until the 4th to take a look through all those.
Other questions on this item?
What is the direction that's going to be given to the consultants regarding reviews? I mean, are they going to be basically validating the estimates that have been provided with the applications, or are they going to do an independent estimate?
The scope was to review project estimates for candidate projects for CBTA regional funding. The solicitation was to secure those services, to verify and comment on the project estimates that were submitted.
Okay,
I think verify is probably the key word.
Mr. Chair?
It was left very broad. And I think that was by design. If there is anything specific that the TAC wants to consider, obviously we're receiving proposals today. So I think there's probably some room to provide any more clarity that might be necessary. But again, this is the first time this has been done, and we always look forward to streamlining the process and updating as needed.
Dorana, you had a question?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's so much, if it was letter B to this item or A, but did we, I didn't know if we had reached the clarity point on the project eligibility and those projects that were excluded.
Yeah, sorry, Darren, I may have mentioned it in passing, but I've been in contact with the jurisdictions who had projects that were still in question.
Mhm.
A lot of those were related to traffic counts that may not have met the threshold for whatever type of project it was.
Mhm.
If you didn't hear from me, then your projects are fine. So, and I think the main questions as we looked at eligibility were based on the counts that we had. There was a question, but if there were more recent counts that were available that could provide an updated ADT, then that might bring us to some clarity. So I think they're really easy to address, and it's something that, like I said, it shouldn't slow us down much at all. We should be able to have that completed list of projects today or tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. And I think that would, like you said, in regard to the regional project selection process, that maybe, we consider where that ineligibility and kind of going back to the locality fits into the process, maybe just to make sure that we know that that's part of the process to kind of check back. And then also just taking note of Hanover and the port with the application for the project within the city of Richmond. Again, something for the project selection process is maybe that when you're submitting a project in another locality, that there's some form of letter of support or recommendation from that locality, I think would be appropriate. And again, we thank you, Hanover, for that submittal. But I do think, it catches some of us off surprise, and we just want to be aligned with what's being submitted within the city of Richmond limits. And then, so again, yeah, I think that all of it lends to revisiting the process, as well as I saw that without the cost, I don't know how to kind of analyze that. But there were a lot of preliminary engineering requests, and we do have a cap on that number annually. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. In regard to, I know we just, with the Cvta Finance Committee, just had a meeting and talked about how beneficial it is for preliminary engineering to be better grab some of the federal dollars. And so I guess, we just want to think about that cap and really what that looks like, whether we're pay-go or bonding, to see how that impacts the region getting more dollars from outside of the region to implement some of these projects. So, those were my comments. Again, a lot of them lean way on making sure we can add a little bit more of our wisdom to this process as we continue to move forward.
Thank you for that, Dorana. Barb, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, Chad, I was wondering if you're keeping a parking lot list of things for us to talk about once we get through this round. You know, Deverona just brought up a few items. I think as we go through, we're just gonna have a lot of things to talk about and use as consideration as we refine the process.
Yeah, we'll be happy to do that.
Other questions on this topic? I have one kind of schedule related chat. So you indicated that the third party review of estimates and all of the follow up with the applicants needed will be complete by March 17th. Is that the date?
That's correct.
All right, so looking at the calendars, the next TAC meeting is scheduled for March 14th, if I'm reading that right.
That's right. Yes. This the green schedule that we had worked so hard on is getting pushed a little bit. We had scheduled for March 9th to have a review by the Finance Committee of the draft funding scenario. And that means all of the projects have been chosen by that point and programmed out according to phase and everything over the 6 years. Clearly, we're not going to be there by March 9th. The same would have happened at the 14th for the TAC. Actually, at that meeting, the other thing on the agenda was to receive any advice or recommendations on changes to local leveraging. That we don't really know what the status of that is going to be. A lot is up in the air right now. So we had moved to have the authority have a public hearing that has been, or that recommendation will come up next Friday to set the public hearing for April 29th with a review period ahead of that, a 15-day review period. That's still going to be the recommendation, I believe. If we have the estimates by March 17th and everything else is in place, I wanted to ask today if TAC thought that was enough time, or does the public hearing need to be delayed? The public hearing obviously does not help us with pre-apps. It was already after the fact. The next deadline for Smart Scale is August. So I think that we could push and have it ready by then. We could also update and have a public hearing in May to make sure everybody is comfortable with what's presented and what the recommendations are going to be. I think staff is flexible and willing to do either one, but we'd certainly welcome any advice or guidance from this group.
So yeah, I'd like input from the group. I would say that the only thing as I see it that's super time critical on this path forward is just meeting the Smart Scale pre-app window. And I don't know what the total number of project applications that are looking to leverage Smart Scale looks like. My guess is it's probably fairly high number of projects. I don't know if you know roughly off the top of your head, Chet. Percentage wise or anything else?
I don't. I can get that. And when we, as we discussed earlier, later this week, when we have the scoring updated, I can provide that information.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, beyond meeting that window for Smart Scale pre-applications, which is not only across all the localities on this call, but also involves GRTC, Plan RVA, and that application pool as well. So and that those applications open in 2 weeks, and on top of that, I think VDOT is asking for or asked for project applications, so which projects we're collectively asking for last Friday. So just don't know where everybody else is in that process and how having any delays, and it looked like is inevitable on the Cvta regional funding side impacts any of your applications. Or pre-applications, I guess, technically.
Yeah, actually, Mr. Chair, I just went and looked at just the raw application data. And there was a question in the application: is this a request for funds to leverage up for other funding programs? And 19 of the 37 said yes. So roughly half.
So yeah, I don't have the answers to that, but I just know that that's something that we need to be aware of. I also have a concern that, you know, I think coming out of this meeting today, we need to be send a fairly clear message to the finance committee that for their next meeting, we need a budget, so that we know what we're working off of, and then this will need to go to full authority as far as the recommended projects for funding for the March 25th meeting, full authority meeting, if I'm correct, Chet. So with the TAC meeting before the final process for the estimate validation on the 17th, do we need to have a follow-up TAC meeting between the 17th and 25th to fully vet these recommendations, so that there's not something coming directly from staff level to the full authority without vetting it through the TAC on recommended projects? Pose that to the group. I see heads bobbing, but nobody has.
So it's hard for me to follow along without some sort of schedule up on the screen.
Yeah.
But are you guys saying that you want a draft list sent to finance for their March 9th meeting that they will react to, so that the full authority can take action at the late March meeting? And if that's what you're saying, finance just met and there was no budget that came out of that meeting. So I don't expect them to, at the March 9th meeting, suddenly come up with a budget. Something that we could do is put together some scenarios. One strictly PAYGO, one 10% bonding, another 15% bonding, I don't know, some scenarios, and have them look at that. That might make it easier for them to make a decision, but I don't know. I felt like we gave up on meeting the pre-app deadline months ago, to my disappointment. But if there's a way to salvage it, that sounds great to me.
I don't know that there's a way to solve it. I think there's certainly, if there is a way, we can try to figure it out. I don't have it figured out.
Does anybody know what information is required in the pre-apps for Smart Scale? I mean, what I guess what I'm getting at is there a requirement that an applicant commit to a certain amount during that period? So Chess is shaking her head no.
I don't
Yeah.
believe so. I mean, they're always pushing you to get as much in ahead of time, but I'd have to go back and look.
So I wonder if that provides some flexibility in terms of what we're trying to accomplish.
Which that was the schedule, Joe, that we had way back wasn't even meeting pre-app, it was meeting the full smart scale application. But I do think that listening to the finance committee meeting, we need the projects and scored and ranked, and then we need a budget. They were going around and around on the budget because they want to know, we need to bracket it in based on what the project list is looking like. So if finance is meeting on the 9th, we need to get them, even if it's just the application list with the estimates submitted and explaining to them they're being validated, so they can start, because they should be coming up with the funding scenarios based on that list. Here's how much we're getting a year. Here's what was submitted as priority by the locals. Here's how they initially rank. When you divide by cost, here they are by group. And then they can start figuring out, well, if we pay-go, we can do these first 5 in this list, or if we do bonding, we can get this many more, but they're lacking information to be able to make decisions. And we're gonna miss another meeting on the 9th because the 17th is the deadline with the consultants. I mean, the locals are gonna get the validated estimates the second. We have by the 4th, we have the following week to meet with consultants to ask questions about the estimates. But I do think whatever we have, we should be giving. I know it's probably going to be a lot of caveating and explaining that things are being looked at and they're not final, but it just seems like at these meetings for the finance committee, they're constantly asking, well, where are we with the projects? Where are we with the projects? Where are we with the projects? So
Maybe
That's
everyone will look at the estimate reviews and think they're great. And
Yeah.
we'll be all done.
well, we at least have the ask that was submitted, like we've talked about, getting those out.
And to clarify regarding, I'm sorry, Todd.
No, go ahead, Joe.
Okay, and I just wanted to clarify the thought behind the how the leveraging was going to work. Was the idea that if a locality submitted an application for leveraging funds in smart scale, if that project ultimately was not selected through smart scale, then the leveraged amount request would just go back into the pot, or was the idea it would stick with the project regardless? Has that part been figured out? Does that make sense, the question?
You wouldn't get it regardless, but I think that the way we set it up in the process allowed people to go through smart scale more than once, like 2 rounds.
Okay.
And if the project wasn't fully funded after those 2 rounds, then the money would go back.
Or could the applicant fund the balance through some other source?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. So it really didn't matter. It doesn't necessarily have to be smart scale, but that's what we've been talking about.
Right. So if everybody's comfortable with basically taking that risk on the application side of you're submitting for smart scale with no guarantee that you're going to get Cvta regional funding, depending on how it scores out and what the funding pot is, with the opportunity to get it funded for the next round, or find other funding, whether it be Cbta local or something, then I think we're in okay shape, if I'm thinking of it correctly. That's really the risk that we're talking about here. Otherwise, I think everybody's, at least speaking for Henrico, I think our projects are all fine if the allocations come out in April versus May versus June. I think it's fine. So the risk being the smart scale pre-application process, but because final applications are not due till August, you have the opportunity to adjust estimates, including the match amount up through that date. If everybody's comfortable working with that, then I think we can manage through this well. Chat, you just put a lot of stuff in the chat.
I just put in the language directly from the framework. to address Joe's question about what happens if you're unsuccessful.
And I would just emphasize that even to what you were saying, Todd, about full applications being due in August and still being able to meet that, we still need to push to meet that because of the iterative nature of the process and this being the first time through, and they're going to be ranked by category, and the board's got to work through that, but we do need to, we're just getting to validated estimates and scores. We do want to keep pushing to be able to get it through the iterative part. Yeah.
So Sharon, I'll get to you in a second. See, you have your hand raised, or is that my hand was over top of Sharon. Never mind. Hate when that happens. So Jessica, to your point, yeah, I mean, that's why, because this is the first time around, we're still all figuring this out. I have concerns about basically taking a group of projects that have been scored and ranked by category and giving it to the full authority and say, here you go. I think our due diligence needs to go through, look at all that, see if it makes sense, make the adjustments, and that, to your point, takes time. So
And a question to that, Todd, is the full authority is now meeting every other month?
no, they're still
They're
every
back
month.
on. Okay.
They're every month unless it's decided that they can skip a month. It's a case by case basis. So we know March is on. We know it looks like April needs to be on. The way things are going, probably May. So they'll meet monthly as needed.
And Mr. Chair, it's just a thought that I was thinking about, having again been at the finance committee and y'all's public work director kind of talking about programming. You know, I would just imagine too that there would be potentially some, after we rank the projects, some kind of examples of that. I don't know how exactly we would get there, whether it would be a locality staff or plan RVA. But I think that that's going to would be helpful probably to the finance committee's decision making, just to even see in that format kind of what that would look like for the different. And I know we can do the example with they're looking for the Fall Line Trail one as well. So I do think we need to get to just speaking on the level of detail and the time to really making sure that we're kind of thinking through and being able to present useful information to that group.
So you're talking about development of and recommendations for spend plans for.
Yeah.
That was something we haven't touched on yet. I mean, obviously not only do we have to look at the amount of funding, but we also need to look at what year that funding needs to be allocated to different projects. I know as part of the applications we submitted, there was a schedule, but that's really a starting point schedule. Some of those have a lot of flexibility. So that's a fairly involved process for this many projects, as well as coming up with a draft spend plan. So that then goes back and sort of it's a loop. That also informs which projects can get funded in what year and how much is needed. So I mean, really, to make an informed recommendation to the full authority, we need to have a draft spend plan that is workable as well. And that actually falls back to the fall line funding as well. I mean, we have the first 2 years of Cbta regional funding dedicated to the fall line, but as we all sit here, we know we can't spend all that money in the first 2 years. So can that money, with the approval of finance and the full authority, can some of that fall line money in the first 2 years, while the amount stays whole, maybe some of that gets pushed out to actual years of construction as we develop the fall line schedule, and then that frees up current year money, fiscal year money for some of the projects, for example. So that's a lot of iterations of work that's needed to really fully inform finance and the full authority. Chet.
Yeah, thanks. I guess just to that point, the the approach that we started this with was that staff would be doing like the rough draft of that spend plan and modeling that after what we've done with RSTP and CMAC and other suballocated funds. Obviously, to put that in front of you all to massage and edit and adjust as needed. But that was the first step. And then, like you said, it's probably going to take multiple iterations to get to a point where it's ready to move forward with any kind of a recommendation or even just cursory review.
Agreed.
I did have a different kind of question. And this is obviously, I'm just putting this up for discussion. At this point, the Finance Committee, I think the Finance Committee reviewed the adjusted forecast numbers. And as far as I know, it's going to be on the agenda for the 25th of $278 million for FY23 to 26 is what the forecast is, just to use as a cash option. With the uncertainty of leveraging right now and debt and everything else, would the TAC want to just clarify that, you know, for this first round, a recommendation could be to just move forward, assuming there is cash until it's a cash option until there's other things to consider. I think staff's perception is we don't want to lose anything while we're waiting for something that isn't decided yet. So I think somebody earlier mentioned coming up with different options. Obviously, the cash only is the easiest, and it's what's going to be ready to go first.
Reactions to that question / suggestion?
I, for one, think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, as just a starting line, that could be kind of the baseline option. And then, but you got to start somewhere. And I think that's the best place to start.
This is Tom. Would it make sense just to come up with maybe two options? Just, you know, one, as we're talking about, and then maybe one partially leveraged or with the bonds, just to give them an idea of how that would impact the budget without making this too complicated.
I like that idea of, you know, doing a one with a 10% bonding.
So is that a doable exercise in the, I guess, April timeframe?
From the staff side, yeah, sure. I want to make sure that it isn't perceived that TAC is making this decision and going with it. I mean, do you think we need to get direction from the authority to move in that way? Is this just an exploratory thing right now that we would need to have other feedback on? Thinking about the calendar more than anything.
Right. My suggestion would be, I'm sure there's an update you're building into the agenda for the February full authority meeting on this effort. So maybe as part of that update, whether it's in the form of information of this is what the TAC's going to do, or whether you want to make that an action item for endorsement by the full authority to direct TAC to do this effort and then filter it through the Finance Committee. I'll defer to you from a protocol standpoint. But yeah, I don't want the perception to be that this was an initiative TAC took upon themselves and is moving forward without the direction of the full authority or even the Finance Committee. But I think it was definitely, this would help inform the process.
Well, it's based on discussions that we have all overheard. If we go with a 10%, That's really been the only number that I've actually heard in meetings. So the update could be that we're moving forward, coming up with funding scenarios based on the adjusted forecast numbers, with an illustrative example of what the impacts would be if we had a 10% bond, so that they would just have that for their information alongside.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, just looking at the bylaws, under the TAC, it says like item B, reviewing recommended projects and programs for funding identified through the prioritization process. So I think that feeds exactly into what Chet was just saying in regard to, you know, the funding that's been identified through this process has been the certified 278 million, as well as what the finance directors working group presented to the finance directors group of the 10% bonding. And then again, still asking for that point of clarification from the group of just in the update, you know, making sure that it's good for us to kind of keep moving in that direction.
Yeah, thank you for checking that, Dorena. So based on that, is there a comfort level? This is directed to Chet, that basically this is just a part of the update to the full authority. This is what TAC will be doing, as opposed to making an action item.
Or do we want to vote for that, for the staff to recommend that approach? I don't know if we can even do that.
I appreciate you putting staff in that position. Thank you. Ultimately, remember, all of this is coming to a public hearing, so there will be review and comment and revision time.
I like the idea of it being an information item. I think that the discussion at it reflects the discussion at finance.
Yeah. So Chad, I'll leave it to you as to where you incorporate this into the full authority agenda, whether it flows out of the finance committee meeting discussion versus the TAC update versus a separate item. But
okay,
I think based on what I'm hearing, I think we all kind of are in agreement that one way or the other, we're fine with that moving forward.
Great, thank you.
All right, any other items of discussion on that topic? All right, hearing none, moving on to item 7, FY21 annual certification and FY23 expenditure plans, review of submitted documentation.
Thank you. The agenda shows action requested. At this point, we do not have all of the documentation from the 9-member jurisdictions, so staff would recommend not taking action at this stage. I think there's still time to make that happen. I would ask that if anyone has questions about this agenda item and what the request was for submittal, please get back with staff and we'll work with you to get that in place. Essentially, there's a couple of things. The most important is the 1-page memo that is signed by the CEO, CAO, certifying that the FY21 expenditures were valid. That's what we need to follow up on our first year of operation. The other items are the FY23 expenditure plan, local allocation plan, and making sure that the projects that you expect to spend money on are listed in that spreadsheet. And then quarterly reporting. There was another spreadsheet that was distributed, so there's 2 different spreadsheets. The quarterly reporting is basically adding the amount that was spent in FY21 if you spent anything, and then for the first 2 quarters of FY22, the amount that you actually expended on the documents. That type of thing is going to be the supporting documentation for that signed one-page memo. There's a
So-
lot there. I'm sorry.
No, thank you for recapping that. And if I recall, Chet, at the finance committee meeting last week, there was a item in the agenda that basically was a resolution that provided, I guess, supporting documentation as to the certification component of that, correct?
Yes.
Correctly.
Yes,
So-
that's right.
So for those localities that need to send this through your local, your county or city attorney and on to the CAO, that may be a helpful document for that purpose. That's what we're using it for. So, and Chet, on your end, just keep in mind that localities that do have to go through that process, it's a multi-step process. So there's a time element, but hopefully everybody is making progress on that, and everybody's encouraged to, as you have any of these documents ready, because they all are sort of independent of each other, you can submit them separately. So.
And I think before we do actually have action requested to accept the annual certification, I think that we need to make sure that I send out, or staff sends out a summary of all of these things. So we'll compile the cover memos, the spreadsheet that has the FY21 and quarterly reporting, as well as the local allocation plan for FY23, and send that out to the entire TAC to review, much like we did last year for at least the local allocation plan.
So is the workflow for this going to be, it will come through TAC first as a action item, then to finance for action and approval, and then to the full authority?
Yes, that's
Okay.
what we'd recommend.
All right, so
Have
then,
finance make the recommendation.
right. So the goal would be to have all the documentation, all three items you mentioned, submitted by each member locality, and give staff time to review it prior to the March TAC meeting, and then that can flow into hopefully the March Finance Committee meeting, which is actually no, March Finance is before TAC again, so it'd be the March TAC, April Finance, and April full authority.
Yes, that would be ideal if we could do that. So the TAC meets on the 14th. If we could say by the 4th, if everyone could have everything to us, and we'll follow up. We can follow up with everybody we haven't heard from, and get clarification on where things stand.
That would be good. Barb, you have a question?
Right. The FY21 annual certification seems like it could go to finance without routing through us. FY23 initially, I think, needs to route through TAC just to confirm that what people are planning on spending their money on is eligible. But otherwise, I think those quarterly reports can skip TAC and go to finance.
Good point. Yeah, the only thing I think by bylaws, TAC is required to review is the spend plan. So, so if everybody's good with it and Chet's good with it, then the other
That works.
two can just go straight to Finance Committee. So you may want to reconsider your date you just gave us, Chet.
Yeah, because Mr. Chair, I was gonna say we were gonna be, another quarter would be due if we stayed with,
Yeah. Next quarter is due in March, I believe.
and I guess that kind of leads, Mr. Chair, to my next question to Chet is, once we get to where these are quarterly, what point, are we gonna, and I know they can get forwarded directly to the finance as Barb was describing. So is it just when a locality submits it those of that have submitted it will go to that next finance committee meeting for submittal. I think it just, because otherwise, we may be waiting on other localities. Just thinking about how that process will go, being that this is going to be, on a quarterly basis now.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I think it would make sense at the end of the day to have this be something that's presented monthly, like the financial reports, and just shows the current status. Obviously, it's not ideal to single out anybody that hasn't submitted their quarterly reporting. So I think just the mechanism and how often that shows up, I guess that's what you're kind of talking about.
Yeah, so that, they don't see that we have scragglers, but at the same time, what do we do when somebody just doesn't submit one?
Well, it is a requirement. And we have to be careful with our spending, otherwise it jeopardizes these funds. You could have a matrix with all the localities, the quarters, with a little X, whether you've gotten it.
Yeah.
And have that as part of the finance committee regular meeting agenda. It's, I'm sure for everyone, it's a hard habit to get into initially. So, but we'll all get in the groove eventually.
Yeah, I mean, what I can offer, and I can say that because I'm not the one that had to do the quarterly reporting on our end, but I did meet with our controller who did, and I think the heavy lift was this initial effort, and then as long as you stay on top of it quarterly, it's pretty easy. A lot of it's just setting up natural account numbers and all those things. So hopefully, and I know it works different in different localities, but hopefully it does become a fairly routine process. So if to your suggestion, if you want staff to create a report card that goes to the finance committee every finance committee meeting, eventually that I see no harm in that.
And is it every meeting or is it quarterly? I guess every meeting, that way, I don't know.
Yeah, in case people are late, then, and I don't think of it as calling people out. For me as staff, if you don't tell me point blank that you're missing something from me, from my locality, then I just don't know. So this will help me
A
to
reminder, yeah.
Yeah, to your point, Dorana, even though the reporting is required quarterly, I think if there's a monthly update provided to finance, then that just becomes sort of a checkpoint that will constantly be updated as things move along. All right, does that help at all, Chet?
Yes, I think we're set.
All right. Next item, fall line working group update. My name is on here, so am I giving this?
I actually, we could see if Shane has anything to share. I know there were a lot of things that were going on at VDOT, but obviously I didn't prep anything for this.
I would love to hear from Shane.
Todd and Chet, I don't know that I have a lot to add either. I think VDOT's kind of still waiting on some direction from Cvta on some of the packages we threw out there as proposals for some design build on fall line. And once we get some feedback on that, we hopefully can put together something so we can move forward with at least some aspect of the trail sooner than later. So that's about all I have. We're still working in the background, but nothing really active on fall line from VDOT's side.
Great, thank you. So yeah, the last fall line working group meeting was February 1st. And then later that week, on the 3rd, was the kickoff for the fall line trail design guide working group. Many of Many of y'all that are on the fall line alignment on this meeting were involved in one or both of those. I think the takeaway from the fall line working group meeting was that we need to have a standing meeting date, just so it's easier for everybody to keep track of when these meetings are and have it on your calendar. So Chet and Janice, I know y'all were working on getting available dates from the group. Has that happened yet?
Sent out the a doodle poll, and I will let everybody know the status of that this afternoon. I haven't gotten any responses in the last couple of days, but I think I did have some initially.
All right, so if you're missing any responses from anybody, you don't have to call them out now, but they know who they are. So please respond. And I think you weren't able to do that as a standing meeting date, but once you have that initial date and whatever day of the week and week of the month it is, we are going to try to hold that as our standing meeting, if I recall.
Right.
Hey, Todd,
Yes, Barb.
people may not know who they are. Because we do so many of these doodle polls.
Yes.
So if Janice can tell us who's missing, that would be helpful.
So you want to be called out.
It's not being called out. It's being reminded because we're all busy.
So
Friendly reminder.
if Chesterfield didn't respond, then you could just blame Chessa.
I don't remember seeing to do the poll. So I'll check again. Barb, you filled it out, I think you said.
Tell you what, I'll send out a
I think I
reminder.
did. I mean, I've done a jillion of them. I
I
don't
know.
know if I did this one. And if I did it for me. So,
Okay. Can you resend it? to
I
me?
will. I'll take a look, and anybody I haven't heard from, I'll contact you this afternoon or resend it, and we'll and then I'll send out a status, let everybody know where we're at on the recurring date.
Perfect.
Right.
Thank you.
And when you resend it, when we go into it, will we know if we've already responded or are we starting over?
No, I'm not going to send it to anyone who's already responded. I'll touch base with anybody I haven't heard from, and then I'll let everybody know what our status is on an ongoing recurring monthly meeting date or
Great.
meeting day of the week.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that will help just everybody keeping track of these meetings because it is important. And to Barb's point, we do have a lot of meetings and a lot of requests for meetings. So that way it makes best use of everybody's time. Chet, do you have anything else to add to the fall line discussion?
Nope, thank you.
All right. Next item 9, Cvta Tac member comments. Does anybody have any comments for the good of the group? All right, hearing none. Next Cvta Tac meeting as discussed is March 14th. So we have a bunch of things happening in the background leading up into that point, including everybody getting their spend plans, certification reports, quarterly quarterly spend, whatever it is, expenditures, and then Chet, on your end, I guess you also need clarification from any localities that have applications that were potentially screened out for supporting documentation. You need that as soon as possible. And then we should be hearing back from on the third party estimates March 2nd. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yes. So will that be coming through directly through the consultants to localities or through you?
It'll come through me. We'll compile everything in one place and send it out.
All right, very good.
I'll also provide an update, hopefully this week, about scoring and all the other data points for the projects.
Very well. And then the next full authority meeting is the 25th. So that's Friday of next week. That will be an in-person meeting as I understand it. And it will be at the Plan RVA offices, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And y'all have gotten your upgrades on your audiovisual equipment that has been working better or working fine. So. All right. Anybody have anything else? Hearing none, we may adjourn. Thank you.